to start.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Ryan Ding and I am a Digital Technical Specialist here at Microsoft. I am joined by my colleagues, Modern Work Solution Specialist Lauren Martinez, who will be assisting me in hosting and moderating the webinar, and Senior Cloud Endpoint Technical Specialist Lauren Nordmann, who will be presenting today on Windows 365. Through the past year, we have presented on a variety of topics through the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, from collaboration and productivity to security and compliance. All recordings of our past webinars can be found on our YouTube channel, and a link will be posted in the chat for your convenience. Today's focus is on Windows 365, our solution for personal Windows 10 and 11 PCs in the cloud. As the modern workplace continues to evolve and move away from the office, there is an ever-growing need for cloud-based remote productivity solutions. Our past webinars have focused on how we are empowering organizations and users through online collaboration tools, video conferencing, and cloud storage. Windows 365 takes us one step further, allowing you to access your work PC from anywhere and any device. Windows 365 Cloud PCs are highly available, scalable, and dedicated per user virtual machines that provide your users with a rich Windows desktop experience on any hardware that can access a browser. Today, we'd like to show you a few things. Firstly, that Windows 365 can provide a fully featured, powerful, yet simple end-user productivity experience that has almost no trade-offs from using physical PCs or hardware. Additionally, from an administration perspective, Windows 365 has been immensely simplified from what most of us are used to with virtual machines or Azure Virtual Desktop. You are able to get Windows 365 PCs up and running from scratch in less than 30 minutes without investing a lot of time in setting up infrastructure. Lauren will walk us through what the experience looks like from both sides of the curtain. Please feel free to post any questions in the chat, and the moderators will be answering them as they are posted. We will also have a few minutes at the end of the presentation for additional Q&A. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our presenter, Lauren, to tell us more.
Thanks, Ryan. Again, my name is Lauren Nordmann, and I am a Cloud Endpoint Technical Specialist in our healthcare space, and I'm based out of Chicago. I'm really excited to be here to talk about Windows 365, and we will have plenty of time to do a demo, and I'll actually show what the end user experience looks like and the admin experience, because both are very important. So a little bit of what we're going to go over today is, what is Windows 365? We do get that question quite often, even though it's about a year and a half since the product's been out. How does it compare to AVD? That's also one of my top questions that I get with every customer that we start talking about Windows 365 with, because we do have two solutions, and it depends on the use case on which one might fit your use cases better. We will then kind of talk a little bit about what the difference is between business versus enterprise, because we do have two different offerings available. Provisioning options, we have 3 different options that you can choose from to actually configure Windows 365 PCs. Use cases that we see in the field, licensing options, then we'll go into a awesome demo, and then we'll leave some questions at the end for some Q&A. So jumping right in, what is Windows 365 Cloud PC? Ryan actually did a good job describing what it is, but usually how I describe it is it's a one-to-one desktop as a service solution that is in the cloud. So just imagine that you have your laptop right now, you throw it up in the cloud, and there it is. It's persistent. All your documents are synced to OneDrive, so you could take it on the go. You could use multiple different devices to connect. So I'm on my Microsoft laptop right now, but if I wanted to maybe move around into maybe different parts of my house, I could just take my phone and I could jump on really quickly to look up some documents, or I could take maybe a different BYOD PC to connect into Windows 365. The options are endless for connecting, which is one of the nice perks. You don't have to be constrained to a corporate-owned device. You could do a BYOD, and it'll be the same experience through and through. So how does this actually compare to Azure Virtual Desktop? You may have heard of AVD before, or what used to be called WVD, which is kind of our existing solution. And we get this question a lot. It's, the new thing on the market. So Where do they differentiate? How are they the same? Like I said, Windows 365 is like a persistent one-to-one based desktop as a service solution. So you can throw Windows 10, any supported version of Windows 10 or Windows 11 on there. We do have both a business and enterprise version. And one of the nice things that kind of differentiates us from AVD is that it's a predictable per user per month cost. So you're paying a flat cost every month. AVD is a little bit more consumption based, so you get that flexibility there where you could have it in a multi-session environment. So you're just paying as you go, which is really nice if you're very cost conscious and maybe you don't have the need for users to be connected, 8 hours a day, 365 days a year. Additionally, we have a nice full Windows-based experience. It's not any of maybe some experience you see in some different VDI solutions that are out there where it's actually just a server overlay with the desktop experience on it. Nope, this is a full Windows 10, 11 desktop. So there's no tweaks on the back end. It's like you're using your your corporate or your personal Windows device. Additionally, we do have integrations with Citrix and VMware. Citrix is in public preview right now, so if you do have a Citrix in the cloud, you could connect into Windows 365 and have that kind of single pane of glass solution. And we did announce a VMware integration during Ignite that is in private preview right now. We kind of move over to the AVD side, a couple of things that kind of differentiate them. If you're looking for a multi-session solution or maybe a remote app streaming, AVD is going to be your option. Reason being is we are kind of sticking to that nice persistent-based solution with Windows 365, and AVD is going to kind of be your multi-session where users can just jump on for an hour, 2 hours at a time, log off, and it goes back to that nice golden image for the next person. Additionally, we do have integrations with VMware and Citrix, which is great, especially in the healthcare environment where our major healthcare solutions that our customers use is usually on Citrix. Again, consumption-based, so pay as you go. And like I said, we do have partnerships with Citrix and VMware, so you could bring those along with your AVD environment as well. And if we jump into a little bit of the differences between business versus enterprise, since we do have two different solutions. Windows 365 for Business is meant for some of those smaller organizations that don't have the full-fledged or need to have the full-fledged product suite with Intune and need to have a BYOD network, kind of the things that you'll see in the enterprise environment. It's super simple to get started. You can simply onboard these users via the Windows 365 portal. One of the nice things is there is no licensing prerequisites. You can do Azure AD join, manage users, but where the caveat is that this is only scoped to 300 users and below. So kind of restricts a little bit there. Most of the customers I work with are in the enterprise space. So some of the benefits that you'll see there is that this is directly integrated with Intune or Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which I'll show in a little bit. So you get that nice single pane of glass approach if you're already managing your devices with Intune or co-managed with SCCM. You do have to bring some licenses with you. So Windows 10, Azure AD P1, and an Intune or Microsoft Endpoint Manager is required. So your M365 E3, E5, or EMS E3, E5, or F suites are kind of those prereqs that you'll see. We do have the options to do hybrid Azure AD join and Azure AD join as well. So you do get those two options for flexibility. And one of the nice things is that you can either bring your own image or you can use one of our curated Microsoft Gallery images, which is highly recommended. And we'll get into that a little bit in the demo on why that's kind of the way to go. We have nice reporting available. A lot of the reporting actually got released during Ignite, so we'll make sure to go over that if you haven't seen it already. And you have an unlimited number of users as long as you bring that Windows 365 license with you. And this is just kind of a breakdown of where the capabilities lie. So you'll see there's Windows 365 for Business kind of has more of that self-service approach. Again, you don't have to bring Intune if you don't want to, and it's just like an easy, quick provision. Where Enterprise is going to shine is that you can bring some of those enterprise integrations. So your conditional access, you get that robust reporting, service health, BYO network if you want, as well as you can bring your own custom images. Awesome. Now I'm going to jump into a little bit of our provisioning options. We have 3 available, and the way I've set this up is kind of, I don't want to say, easy to hard, but more of this is going to be the quickest to get you a Windows 365 PC, and then the other 2 options are going to require a little bit more configuration from a customer perspective. So the first one that we'll talk about is the one that we do recommend. It's the Microsoft hosted network with Azure AD join. The reason why we recommend this is that you don't have to bring anything with you from your infrastructure side. So you don't have to bring any resource groups, express routes, site-to-site networks, no line of sight to your domain controller. You basically just make sure you have a Windows 365 license and have the appropriate permissions to set up Windows 365. And what's nice about hosted network is you just pick the region and Windows 365 will kick off that provisioning for you. Super nice, super quick. A lot of customers that have tested this really enjoy it because, again, there's no complexity about bringing your own network and some of the prerequisites that are needed for that, which we noticed that kind of holds up some of the customers from testing Windows 365 because they may not be as mature in the Azure infrastructure space to have some of the prereq setup that we'll see in the BYO network option. So again, this one is our recommended. This does sit on the Azure side, so you don't actually manage the network. It's all controlled by Microsoft or owned by Microsoft. So you don't have to worry about, hub and spoke or IP addresses. That's all carried through. And you'll actually have some of the nicest performance because you're leveraging that Azure backend. So if you actually did a speed test on that Microsoft hosted network, you'll see some pretty awesome speeds. Next is what we call kind of that nice middleman approach. You have Azure AD join, but you're bringing your own network. So this does require the customer to have a subscription, have a VNet, have the permissions to for Windows 365 to provision on that BYO network. So again, there's a little bit of uplift for the customer to get started. But one of the niceties is that you have a line of sight into your on-premise network. So if you're kind of in that co-managed hybrid approach still, which is totally fine, a majority of my customers are, you can do the BYO network, but still have the nicety of being modern managed with Azure AD join, and the end users will still be able to access any sort of on-premise resources since they'll be sitting on your network technically. And then last but not least is hybrid Azure AD join with the BYO option. This is actually what we released Windows 365 with last year. That was the only option that we had available. And this is for customers that maybe aren't fully modern managed yet or haven't taken the step forward to do full Azure AD join, but still want to have the benefit of a Windows 365 cloud PC. So just like the Azure AD join with the BYO network, you do have to bring your own VNet subscription. You need to have a line of sight into your on-premise domain controller so it can get DNS and have access to the on-premise resources. So again, a little bit of lift for the customer to get started, but you do get the niceties since this technically does join the domain. You don't have to do much modernization. It can still leverage GPO. It does sit on your domain controller, so you can control what OU it sits in. If you're still a very heavy configuration manager user, you can continue to leverage that if you're not fully into the Intune space. So again, 3 different options. Definitely depends on wherever you are in your modernization strategy. Ideally, we would love everybody to be on the hosted network because, again, it's super easy to get started. But a lot of customers still have requirements to have that on-premise connection so they can access data, or just haven't been fully modernized where they can leverage the Azure AD join yet. And also, before I jump, one of the nice things about Windows 365 is you can have a mix and match of all three. So if you have some customer or some users that can leverage the hosted network because they don't need to have any sort of line of sight, or maybe are just kind of a SaaS-based user that can use VPN, great, you can throw some of those end users on there. Maybe you have some that just need to be hybrid joined and still need that line of sight because not fully ready to modernize. Great, you can have a BYO and have those users scope to that hybrid Azure AD join model, and you can have that nice mix and match approach. So if you ever do get ready for modernization, a great way to test it out is you can just throw some users into that more Azure AD hosted network route and see what breaks. One of the nice things about testing with Cloud PC is if it breaks, it's not a big deal. If you break your corporate laptop, it becomes a whole thing. So that's one of the benefits of having a Cloud PC. All right. Jumping into what are some of the business scenarios or use cases that we see Windows 365 for. Again, I'm in the healthcare space, so we actually see quite a bit of, probably my top three would be IT admins and developers, mainly remote developers. So during COVID, a lot of customers were not able to ship devices across the country because of device shortages and also just the cost of shipping those devices. And Windows 365 really shined in that space because we could have the contractors or these remote developers use their own PC and just connect into Windows 365. You manage all the security on Windows 365. So if you have, Defender or DLP, that can continue to run. So you have that security on the back end, and you can control it while the remote developer doesn't have to wait for a PC. They can just jump on when they need, jump off. Awesome. It was super great. That's actually one of my top use cases in the customers that I work with from every day. Which then kind of spills into that vendor and contractor use case. So you have those remote contractors, maybe vendors that come in for a couple months, maybe they're doing an audit. Give them a Windows 365 PC. Again, it's tied to your security platform. So it's tied to your conditional access, your antivirus, your DLP, and you can be safe on that end and then just have the contractor use their BYO PC and connect in when they need. And then when they're done with their contract, you can just remove their license and then reassign it to the next person. Additionally, mergers and acquisitions has always been a top use case for my healthcare customers, just mainly because, throughout the year, they're acquiring and divesting companies. So giving users that day zero approach or day one approach has been extremely impactful because if you've ever been through a merger and acquisition, probably that's one of the top complaints that I've always heard when I've done them is that, oh, it's great that I've been acquired, but I don't feel included with the company that's acquired me because I'm still using my own laptop. It's very confusing, and when I need to go to the parent company's resources compared to my old company's resources. So giving them Windows 365 where it could be, hey, we're going to just let you have your old laptop while we kind of work through this acquisition, and you can connect to Windows 365 to access everything that the parent company is offering for you. It's just extremely impactful. End users and customers really enjoy that feature, that they don't have to wait for laptops to be shipped, and end users aren't concerned about having two laptops or how do I actually connect to X, Y, and Z resource. So super impactful there. Alrighty, licensing options, which funny enough, we changed a little bit of some of the features that one of our sets of SKUs supports, which I'm glad I put it in because I would have forgotten. But these are the products SKUs that we offer for Windows 365. And I've highlighted two where my customers usually gravitate towards. Reason being, for the 2x8 by 128, that's kind of our standard baseline SKU. It's $41 per user per month, and that's the sticker price. This gives you the full version of Teams. If you go into these 2x4s, you're only getting the audio version of Teams. That's not fun for everybody. You want to have that full Teams experience, so you kind of have to be at that 2x8 by 128. And then the 4x16, this is kind of more for our power users that don't need to go crazy with the 8x32, but need a little bit more power to run some applications. So we usually recommend the 4x16 by 128. And what actually just got dropped, which will be highly beneficial for customers, is that before 8x32s were the only one to house some of those developer requirements like nested hypervirtualization or the subsystem of Linux. Just this week, we announced the capability for 4x16s to have nested virtualization and that subsystem of Linux as well. So you don't have to go crazy and purchase these extremely expensive SKUs unless you need to. You can have that nice wiggle room middle point where, hey, I need to have Hyper-V for, a couple of different use cases, but I don't need to have the powerhouse of an 8x32. So I had a lot of customers asking for it. They're very excited that this is finally announced. And I think it's going to be a good middle point where you don't have to jump into those power heavy SKUs if you don't need to. And we'll get into it in the demo, but you may be asking yourself, hey, most customers aren't rocking a 128 hard drive anymore. They're doing like a 512 or sometimes a terabyte because that's what my standard OEM or Surface device has on it. So how do we keep them so low? We actually do have a default sync with OneDrive. So that's kind of how we can keep those disk space so low, and maybe you don't have to go right off the bat and need a 512. You can stay in maybe that 128 and 256 and allow OneDrive to be that sync so you don't have to have a high hard disk size. And again, we'll go into this in the demo a little bit on how that all works and what you can do if maybe you need to up to the higher size and maybe you need to resize down. And then I did have just a little bit of, if you want to learn more about Windows 365, what we have available. Don't be afraid because it says Windows 365 in healthcare. A group of us in the healthcare space as sets have curated a whole bunch of Windows 365 content for our healthcare customers, but it's really not healthcare specific. It's very generic, but we do also have some healthcare specific articles as well. We did it just for a one-stop shop for our customers because we were talking to them so much about Windows 365, and we just kind of wanted to have a jumping point for them to read all the news and have all the information available for them at the tip of their fingers. If you haven't seen, we do have a Windows IT Pro YouTube channel. That's where all of the Windows 365 and the Microsoft Mechanic videos, as well as the technical takeoff that happened after Ignite, are kind of stored. And there is some Windows 365 information available and YouTube videos available if you want to check it out. The Windows 365 product group actually has a series called Windows in the Cloud that they usually do something monthly. It's either AMA style or just kind of the more you know kind of videos. Really good videos if you want to learn about what's coming with Windows 365 or maybe a very impactful feature drop that just happened. As a PSA, I did see that they are going to talk about probably some of the most hotly requested features from customers, which is Windows 365 boot, which would be that you can just turn on a laptop and it will boot into Windows 365. There is no intermediary OS on the back end or on the front end. Like we see right now, you have to, have a Windows device and RDP into it. And then there is the Windows 365 switch feature that got announced at Ignite. And I think we've teased it in a couple different places as well, where basically Windows 365 will sit on the Windows 11 taskbar and you click the button and then you can go into your Windows 365 cloud PC without having to have some of these intermediaries like the Windows 365 app or the RDP client or the browser. And if you have, if you are a GCC customer or you have GCC customers, there is an AMA that's going to go on for just those government customers where you can ask whatever you want about Windows 365. We do support GCC for Windows 365. It came out, I believe, during Ignite. So if you're interested and you want to learn a little bit more about maybe some of the differences between what Windows 365 is compared to the GCC SKUs, totally jump on those. I always find the AMAs with the product team super impactful. They usually give you some roadmap ideas and will kind of give you some information on where they're planning on going. So usually when I have time, I will even jump on these as a Microsoft employee to get some visibility on what we're telling customers from a product perspective. Alrighty, and we are going to jump right into the demo. Again, I think this is probably the most impactful portion of Windows 365. It's great to talk about it, but actually seeing it in action is probably some of the best ways of being sold on Windows 365. So I'm going to actually jump in to my cloud PC that I've been logged into, and we'll kind of talk about a couple of ways that you can log into Windows 365. But again, this is my Windows 365 cloud PC. Nothing different from what my physical Surface Windows device looks like. I have my own start menu. It syncs my OneDrive documents. So you see that Elsa here has her own documents that have been synced. So I can, move back and forth on this document as needed. Windows 365 is optimized for Teams, so I can use Teams just like I would on my physical device. We do have some technology, so if you've ever used old school VDI before, you may have not had the best experience with your with Teams or Zooms or WebExes. We've kind of fixed that so you have a one-to-one experience with what you're seeing on your physical device from a joining a meeting and chatting perspective, which is really powerful because that's usually like one of the things that gets brought up in the beginning is like, well, how is Teams going to work? Because I've done this before and Teams is awful on VDI. And then we actually show them and they're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I don't see some of the jitteriness and there's no lag. It's actually comparable to my physical device. And just a little note, and we'll get into it. These are managed by Intune. You could also manage with Configuration Manager in that co-managed environment. So I do have Company Portal. I can push apps like I normally would any physical device. I can also make apps available. And again, this is basically your device, so you can secure it and manage it how you see fit. We just give you the tools to get a Windows desktop spinned up for you. And since I'm here, we actually have 3 different ways to connect into Windows 365 currently. We did announce at Ignite the new Windows 365 app, and it was only for Windows 11, but it just, I think in the last month or so, became public preview for Windows 10 as well. This will be comparable if you've ever seen the browser experience, which I'll show in a second, for users to connect into Windows 365. Reason being is that you get a little bit more of that control and some of the power behind what makes Windows 365 nice from both an admin and end user perspective. So I'm not going to connect into this because I'll just inception this Windows 365 PC. But as you can see here, Elsa's connected into Windows 365. This is tied to conditional access, so you could have MFA or additional security requirements before they can actually log in, which is awesome. Once they're logged in, they'll see any cloud PCs that are assigned to them. This one right here is a Windows 11. You can see the SKU that is available for them. And one of the nice things about Windows 365 from the end user perspective is that we give them a lot of power to control their Windows 365 device before they actually go and complain to IT that maybe something's not working, or they need to have it restarted and they don't have the power to do so. So we kind of helped with that process. So as an end user, maybe my Windows 365 PC is running slow or just something's not really working right. I can just go into the Windows 365 app and just kick off a restart. I don't have to go ask IT or go up to the service desk and ask them to put in a ticket for me. I can go do that myself and save me some time and save service desk some time as well. One of the really awesome features is also point-in-time restore. So maybe you have a developer use case, and we all know developers sometimes like to break their machines because they're doing testing, coding, and maybe they have Hyper-V with a whole bunch of VMs that have just gone astray. And they know that it was working a couple days ago and now it's not working. Well, you can give those end users the power to do a point-in-time restore on their devices. So you can control this on the admin side, and we'll show that in the configuration. But I can go in and I can pick, 2.7. This is when I think the last time I used it and I know it was working okay. And I can just hit restore. My device will restart. It will go through that whole restore phase, and then I'll be able to log in and it will be at that point in time stamp, which is super nice. Also, this is not charged, so you don't have to bring your own storage account. There's no cost to the customer, which is also super awesome. I highly recommend just kind of turning it on for everybody, because you never know when you might need to do a point-in-time restore, and it's super easy to, even try that as like the first or second level troubleshooting before blowing away their whole device and doing a reprovision. And then you may see rename here, and it might be something that's a little scary. This is only for the end user. It's not renaming it on the admin side. So this is more for end users that might have multiple cloud PCs in the future, where they can rename it and say, hey, this one is going to be for certain use cases. And then I have just like a dedicated day-to-day cloud PC. And then additionally, we do have a troubleshooter, which I think is really awesome. So maybe I can't connect to my cloud PC, and I actually was messing around with my DNS, changed something because I wanted to go to 8.8.8.8.8, and that screwed up my cloud PC for whatever reason. As an end user, I can go into the troubleshooter. It will actually go through some of the common steps that Windows 365 needs to be able to connect and perform correctly, and it will try to remediate. And then if it doesn't, then you can escalate to IT and then say, hey, I've done this. These are the steps that I've done, and it's still not working. So then IT can take over and do some additional diagnostics. So just an overall, again, Windows 365, as you can see, it is just a standard desktop. It's in the cloud. I am using the Microsoft hosted network for this one, but I have used both the Azure AD Join and Hybrid in the past. It's just a lot easier to spin these up when I need to for demos, and we'll kind of talk about why in a second. But again, same desktop as your physical, you manage it the same, nothing's really changed besides that it's in the cloud. That's it. Righty. Now if we flip to the administration perspective, and again, this is for the enterprise-based use, but I know that business does have some Intune capabilities as well. But we're going to kind of just focus on the enterprise portion of Windows 365. If you've been into Intune or Endpoint Manager in the last year or so, you've probably seen this blade for Windows 365. You've probably been stuck by a paywall if you don't have any licenses, but this is where you will manage anything Windows 365 related, which is super nice, kind of keeps it in its own little box. The way I usually show these demos to customers is I do the right to left, mainly because that's kind of how you have to set it up if we were going through this on the configuration stage. So we're going to kind of start from user settings and we'll move our way through. User settings, pretty generic. This is where you can set local admin. By default, Windows 365 sets all enterprise users as a local user, not as an admin. So if there is that requirement, you can set that up for your end users, and you can scope it to different groups. So maybe your IT group can have local admin, but the rest of the end users can't. You can have that flexibility. Additionally, you can control that point in time restore that I had showed in the Windows 365 app. So if you don't want end users to have that or have the power to do so, you can turn that off, but you could also keep it on for admins to do. And then you can set the point in time service and how often you actually want this to take a snapshot of that device. If we kind of move over to the next one, this is where the meat and potatoes is, especially if you're doing a BYO network. As you can see, I actually have two different ones, and I purposely break one just to kind of show the power of why we say Windows 365 is kind of an easy button approach to VDI. We actually have what we call a watchdog service that constantly checks to make sure that all these services and utilities are in place. So if you were to provision a cloud PC or access a cloud PC, you would be successful. So if we go through the hybrid one, mainly because it's failed, you'll see that there's a little bit of some requirements that are needed, and hopefully this loads up. It's being a little slow today. So basically for any BYO network, you have to name it. So typically we would name it based on the region. You have to bring a subscription, you have to bring a resource group, and you have to bring a VNet, and you as well as a subnet as well. I usually just use the default one, but everybody's a little bit different. Additionally, since this is hybrid Azure AD joined, you do have to bring a domain join account as well, since this does join the domain controller. So you do have to provide your on-premise domain name. Highly recommended to do the scope it to a OU. Don't do like me and just let it sit in the computer's OU, just to kind of keep it clean and you know which one is Windows 365 devices in case you need to do a little bit of tweaking with the GPOs. And then you just bring that domain join account and with the credentials. Once you set that up, what actually happens is in the background, it tries to create a ghost Windows 365 PC, and it goes through all these checks to make sure that if you provision your first Windows 365 PC, you'll be successful. And what's nice about the Watchdog service is that it's constantly checking. So this isn't just a one and done. It's doing it every hour or so to make sure that all the systems are up and running. So you can see right here, there's something actually wrong with my device sync, and that there's an error. And if I were to provision a hybrid joined Windows 365 PC, it's probably not going to work. What's really nice about this is not only does it tell me that there's an error with the service, I can actually drill down into Windows 365 into this error, and it actually gives me some suggestions on what might actually be wrong. And if it's not super in-depth, I can actually do a learn more. It will guide me to my learn documentation so I can do a little bit more research if it's not giving me exactly what I need to troubleshoot. But for this one, I know that there's probably something wrong with my Azure AD Connect, which I do know it hasn't been syncing for a couple of days. And so I probably should go start there first to see what's wrong with it. Is the service not running? Is there something wrong with the DC that it's sitting on? Do I need to restart it? So again, nice way to have that easy button approach. You don't have to have this VDI knowledge. If you've ever managed like an RDS or a Citrix before, if something breaks, it's on you to go fix it. And that's probably some of the biggest stress inducers if you don't know what's wrong and then you're trying to figure out what potentially could be the cause and how to fix it, where we actually kind of give you some guidance on, hey, maybe you should start here. And if this isn't giving you enough information, let's go into Learn documents to see what else could possibly be up. And I'm not going to go into the Azure AD join. It's very similar because you have to bring your own network, so subscription resource group, subnet, and VNet. But this one's actually successful, so you can see that it's always passed. We do have alerting integration available, so if you want a IT group to have an alert if something were to go red in these checks. We do have that integration with Intune, so I can then pump either an email or a Teams message to a group to go do some research and see why it's broken. Custom images, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but we do allow customers to bring their own custom images, or what I like to call fat images. Very similar to what you might do in an old configuration manager or AVD setting. If you have a complex image, some customers like to just upload it and have that just be what provisions, so they don't have to drop a whole bunch of different applications right off the bat for an end user to connect, and kind of saves them some time. Downside of custom images is that, one, you have to maintain them, and two, typically they might provision a little bit slower depending on how fat that image is. So there is a little bit of downside with that, but awesome tool if you have a highly complex environment and I haven't really figured out all the ways of getting all those applications in the right order on just a native Windows 365 gallery image. Next, and this is kind of the last thing you would need before a Windows 365 device will provision, is a provisioning policy. So I have one that's scoped to my IT users. And it's super easy to get a provisioning policy started. You'll see right here that we do allow single sign-on. I think that got dropped in December, November timeframe. So we do allow SSO. Super nice, because I never remember all my demo account passwords. So I can just connect in and not have to worry about what password's which. And highly recommend to check it out if you have Windows 365 and haven't tested it out yet. You can do your join type. So if you're doing hybrid Azure AD join or Azure AD join, this is where you'll set it. I'm doing the hosted network, so I'm actually setting the geography of what data center I want to have my Windows 365 provision. And I have it set to automatic, so it'll kind of just make a determination on what the best region to set this cloud PC is. I'm in Chicago, so I have it set to central. I had been sitting in the East US one for quite a while. I didn't really notice a difference between networking performance very much. So that's kind of the nicety about doing the hosted network route. You really don't have much of a change of experience. Now, I'm sure if I went to like the West US or something across the seas, I'll definitely see a little bit more slowness, but any data center that I've connected to or region that I've connected to, I haven't really noticed much of a performance issue with the hosted network option. And then here is where, if you don't want to bring your own image, you can select from our gallery image. So these are very similar to what you see with like an Azure VM gallery image. This is something that we constantly update to make sure the cumulative updates are available, as well as we make sure that the Teams optimizations are there off the bat, so you don't have to try to inject them post provision. And we support any supported version of Windows 10 or 11. Windows 7 is not an option here. If you still need Windows 7, that's where you're going to have to start moving into the AVD route to bring that image to your users. And we do have a couple of different options available. Most customers gravitate towards this Windows 11 or Windows 10 with M365 apps installed. Reason being is then you don't have to wait for the apps to actually provision. It'll just be there off the bat. The OS optimizations are kind of there if you have maybe a low powerhouse use case, so like that 2x4 SKU, where you know that you don't have a lot of power there, but you want to give them a Windows 365 PC to do maybe some low powered tasks, maybe some data entry, or maybe SaaS-based browsing, stuff like that. If you did bring your own network, you can choose it in this option as well. And what's really nice about this is that you just kind of hit next, 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 make sure that you have a group set to Windows 365 that has a license, and it will kick off provisioning if it hasn't already. Usually provisioning kicks off fairly quickly. I've never seen it take any more from, I don't know, 5-10 minutes to actually start. And then kind of time varies on which option you choose. Of course, the host network is going to go a lot faster. Usually 15 to 30 minutes is what I've seen for like the BYO networks. Azure AD join is around 30-ish minutes, give or take. And then the hybrid join is probably going to be your slowest, mainly because it has to join the domain controller, then wait for that Azure AD sync to happen. And if you've missed that Delta sync, you have to wait like that 15 or 30 minutes for the next sync to happen. So that's usually where the slowness comes in. And then all your cloud PCs will be sitting in here as long as they have a license available. I only have 2 that are set up, but one of the nice things is I can see what SKUs are available. I have one that's on a 2x8 and then 4x16. You can see the users that are provisioned for it. So you can have that nice little one-stop shop for your cloud PCs. If I were to have a failure or if I had a device that was in grace period, so if an end user has left the company or doesn't need Windows 365 anymore, it goes into 2 stages. Once you remove that license, it goes into grace period for 7 days, and then it gets deprovisioned. You can force that grace period to end right off the bat if you need to free up that license. But by default, it kind of just does its own thing. And then after 7 days, it gets deleted. Now, from a admin perspective, if you ever needed to manage these devices or had to do some troubleshooting, if we go into one of my cloud PCs, you'll see that very similar to any of the other devices that you would manage, but you get a couple of different options that you wouldn't see on just a regular Windows physical PC. You get the option to do the restore. So just like the end user had that option to do the point in time restore, admins can do that point in time restore as well. I get the same amount of options. I can kick it off and have that restore happen. I can do a reprovision. So reprovisions, think of that as like a full wipe and reload. So it brings those end users back to that kind of golden state, just that fresh Windows 10, Windows 11 image. I'll have to put all the apps back on it. But one of the nice things is since Windows 365 natively syncs to OneDrive, there shouldn't be much data loss in the process if you needed to go to the reprovision route. And then resize. Resize is really awesome. So I have a couple of customers that have use cases for maybe some of their end users are on projects where they're on 2x8s, but they really need 4x16s because they're running a couple of different applications that are a little bit more power hungry, and the 2x8s are kind of slowing them down. Right from the console, as long as you have a licensing available to do the step up, I could move my device from, this is a 4x16, so if I had a license, I could move my ELSA user to the 8x32 by 128 or whatever, right from the console, as long as I do have a license. And as you can see, I got the nasty Graham message because I do not. But that's one of the nice things. You can just flip them to a new SKU. It will reset, or I'm not, sorry, not reset, restart the end user. It will do some magic on the back end and it'll reboot, and that user will have the new SKU and nothing will have been changed. They'll still be able to access the same apps. It's not doing a full wipe and reload. It's basically doing some magic on the back end to make sure that it's changing the CPU and the RAM and the storage. Now, we did release a couple of months back the ability to resize up and now resize down. Before it was kind of, you can only resize up and then you were kind of screwed if you needed to ever resize down again. So we kind of had to make sure we warned our customers that, hey, if you give somebody an 8x32 and you can't get them back down again, they're stuck in the 8x32 unless you do a full reprovision on a different license for them. But now we can resize down. So this ELSA user is on a 4x16. I could bring my user down to a 2x8 by 128. Only caveat is that you can only you can move down your processor and your RAM. You can't move down your OS storage from a resize down. So I'm stuck on a 128. If I were to resize down, I need to make sure that I'm at a 128 as well. I can't change that. It does change for the resize up. You can go whatever the heck you want, but for that resize down, you do need to kind of stay the same. So there is a little bit of a caveat there because only the 4x16s and the 8x32s have the 512 SKU. So that is something that you would have to keep in mind if you were needed to flip up and down as needed. And we are supported with the new remote help and then the future Intune advanced management SKUs that are coming out in the next month or so. So if I needed to, I could launch remote help. I do not have the license, but you can integrate with remote help to do any sort of remote assistance, or you could use the team viewer as well if you have that integration. And from a troubleshooting perspective, we do have a nice performance tab. So let's say Elsa's calling the service desk and just complaining that, hey, things aren't working right, super slow, takes me a long time to log in. I don't know why. Can you do some troubleshooting? You can actually look right here to see, how long is it taking Elsa to log in? How long is that sign-in time? How long is Elsa actually connecting to our cloud PC, which has always been a must-have for our IT admins, where they were like, okay, it's great that I'm giving Windows 365 out, but how do I actually ensure that these end users are using Windows 365? Because sometimes they say they need it or they want it for a project, and then they never tell IT that they're done with it, or they're actually not using it and they're continuing to use their physical device. So you can actually look right here to see that, hey, Elsa's been connecting into this device constantly. I'm going to make sure that she keeps this license, as well as I can look at some of the connection speeds for Elsa to see maybe I need to move her to a different region. Maybe there is some CPU issues, which we'll drill into in a second. So you get a lot of control and a lot of visibility into what's going on with those cloud PCs. Which is super powerful because before you had to do your own diagnostics, maybe look at a whole bunch of logs, never fun for anybody. So having a nice visual representation that service desk can use before they escalate on to maybe desktop support or system administrators is super powerful. And I know we're running light on time, so I'm just going to show the resource performance and then we'll kind of do the Q&A. But just like any of your other devices, if you've leveraged Tenant Attach or just strictly Intune, you can get some of the information on what's going on with a cloud PC, or from an app performance perspective, from a device performance perspective, and a resource performance. So if we use that use case where Elsa's complaining that she's having just really bad device slowness, you can look at endpoint analytics and drill into some of the information to see, is Elsa really telling the truth? Is there, do I see these CPU spike times? Do I need to do some research into maybe some apps that are maybe killing the processor and the RAM? You get a lot of powerful information from endpoint analytics. And if you're just not using it for your physical devices, highly recommend to do so. I always felt this was a super powerful tool when I was a system administrator managing physical devices. It was great to show management, hey, we can see that these device models are not performing as well as these new device models that we have when we're doing new device evaluation. So just kind of a general PSA there. Awesome for cloud PC, even nicer for your physical devices to have a holistic overview of what's going on. And I know we have 5 minutes left. Any questions? Anything that I've skipped that maybe you have questions about or want to see?
I'm just going to jump in if that's okay. We did have one question. The question was, can Azure Defender for Cloud protect Windows 365 cloud PCs? And so I just want to make sure that I was on the right track with the answer. Defender for Endpoint is typically what would be used to protect Windows 365 PCs. Am I on the right track there, or is there something else that we could also consider from the Azure standpoint?
Yep, so that's a good question. Yep, you could use Defender for Endpoint on the cloud PCs to do the AV management, but you could use Defender for Cloud apps tied into conditional access, if you want to block like some of the downloads and the copy and paste. We do have settings within Intune to manage some of the clipboard access like you would a standard RDP session. So if you don't want to have that redirection for clipboard, printers, or AV redirection, you can also set that as well. But if you want to have that control, but kind of control it from the Defender for Cloud apps so you can have some of that auditing, definitely can link it into your conditional access policies.
Got it. Cool. So that can definitely wrap in to Defender for Cloud apps, which is our CASB product. Is there a way that Azure Defender for Cloud would help protect Windows 365?
That's not super familiar with how Azure Defender for Cloud works. I know you can do some monitoring if you are leveraging like a BYO network and you want to do some of the monitoring of the traffic, you can do that. There is some stipulations with how Windows 365 works. We don't want to do a lot of the SSL inspection like you would see from a Zscaler, just because of some of the slowness, and that traffic interception may reduce performance, but you should be able to do some of that, like that inspection of the network traffic, as long as it's not heavily reducing that SSL performance and some of the checks that are available. So hopefully that answers that question.
I think it does. And thank you for clarifying. And also the addition, of course, our CASB product is one that will definitely integrate the Defender for Cloud, like meaning on the modern work side, specifically for Defender for Endpoint. You have your DLP policies that route through that CASB as well. So it's a pretty holistic product that we do offer. And we do have a webinar that we did over that a couple of months ago. And so I'll also post that in the chat if anybody's interested in that CASB product. But looks like that was the only question, Lauren.
Yeah, just general PSA for the CASB product. Really nice. We definitely have a lot of customers that ask, well, the BYO option, but still want to stay secure because they want them to have access, but don't want have that look, but don't touch approach. So CASB is awesome, or Defender for Cloud apps is a great way to kind of control that, because you can have that nice look where you can block downloads, but still let them have that experience. So awesome tool. Highly recommended, especially if you're doing a BYO.
Well, right on, Lauren. I am, since that's the only question that I do see, of course, we do still have a couple of minutes if anybody else would like to ask, but I will hand it off to Ryan to finish us off here.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. And thank you so much to Lauren as well for sharing your knowledge with us today and demonstrating the powerful capabilities of Windows 365, as well as the admin and user experiences. Thank you to the audience as well for joining us today. Lori and I will be sending out a follow-up email to all attendees with all URLs that we've shared in chat, as well as the presentation recording. We will also be planning out some of our future webinars very soon, so the sign-up link for that will be available in the near future as well. If you have additional questions or are interested in trying Windows 365 yourself, please reach out to your dedicated Microsoft representative or partner. And with that, since we are just about at time, we're going to go ahead and finish up here. Lauren or Lori, anything last minute to add?
Nope, I think you. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
You first, Lauren.
I think you hit it, Ryan. Again, if you do have interest in Windows 365 and your enterprise customer, please reach out to your account rep or account exec. We do have trials available, and any of the cloud endpoints and specialists, we're happy to help walk you through getting a POC set up or getting a partner to help you.
Awesome. And I didn't have anything to add. So Lauren, thank you very much for useful information.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, Lori. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you,
We'll
everyone.
see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.